Hello, my name is Justice Graves, and I'm currently running for school committee member of the Narragansett Regional School District here in Templeton, Massachusetts. The video today is going to be about the topic race and sex stereotyping and scapegoating. I have done a previous video on this that introduces the subject very well, where it is titled White Supremacy Conditioning in Andover, Massachusetts, where I talk about a false diversity trainer actually teaching her students how to be racist, and that where she commits an event that I have dubbed the Andover experiment, where she does great harm to different minority groups in the area of Andover and Lawrence towards the eastern side of Massachusetts. If you have time, I recommend that you go and check out that video first, because some of the graphics from that video, particularly some of where I talk about the cycles of modern racism, will be brought up again today. Today, I'm going to be talking about the faces of the modern, or of the current white power caucus, as I have dubbed them, and specifically I'm going to talk about one person in particular for the majority, and then a few other people as well, who I am going to be calling the Queen of White Supremacy herself. I'm going to get into who she is. I'm going to get into the literature that she's written. She is essentially what I have dubbed an untouchable, and we are going to see that in just a second. I'm going to switch over. And I would just like to point out that this video is for administrators, it is for parents, it is for concerned members of the community. This video is not and should not be for children under the age of 18. This should be for more of an informative situation, so that educators can understand what they should be aware of and fearful of when it comes to false diversity trainers coming into their classrooms or giving them materials for their classrooms, and what to spot. So, the faces of the White Power Caucus. I want to go back over what is called the cycle of modern racism, which we covered in the first video I have done on this topic. Up here are the Untouchables, and the Untouchables, which is what we are going to talk about today, dip in and out of and actually teach and recruit people to perpetuate this new cycle of white supremacy. And I'm going to go through it again, kind of step by step. First, there is the foundation. You are desensitized. Your will is broken. They break your self-trust. They make you doubt yourself, and they gaslight you over and over and over again. And they want you to admit that you are a racist. They want to push their racism onto you so that you become complicit in it. They want you to be involved with what they are doing. In the first phase is when you have to admit it, and when you have to start actually self-doubting yourself, and you have to reach your lowest points of self-esteem. In phase 2, you start to normalize abuse. You start to normalize your own abuse that people are giving onto you, and you start to normalize abuse that you are giving onto other people. And in phase 3, you actually start to enact events that are racist, or doing things that are explicitly racist, fulfilling the prophecy that you did in phase 1, that you spoke into existence in phase 1, where you said that you were a racist. Well, now you are fulfilling that prophecy, and you are becoming a racist. And this happens over and over and over again. The first time you do it, you fulfill the prophecy, the self-fulfilling prophecy, but every time you do it after that, it's just a continuous and aggressive and vicious cycle. And so we are going to talk about the Untouchables. The Untouchables are a group of people who are exempt from the rules. They exhibit a lot of the rules and they teach it, but they don't follow anything. Essentially what happens is that this group of Untouchables, or these other, it's not just necessarily a person. We are going to talk about 2 institutions in this video where these different groups have also perpetuated white supremacy in the classroom. What's happening is that these different groups, and specifically this person who is the queen of white supremacy, is able to touch onto these people and make them racist, and then pull off of them and not leave her fingerprints on them at all. She's essentially someone who can sell this to you with a smile, very similar to Kate Slater from the IRT, the Institute for Recruiting Teachers. She can sell it to you with a smile, but she also is highly manipulative. These people are highly manipulative, these Untouchables, and they're able to sort of go through it and create even more dynamic ways to fulfill all of these different phases and to keep making it fresh and new for people. They're very predatory in nature. And so we are going to talk about the queen of racism herself, Dr. Robin DiAngelo, the author of New York Times bestseller White Fragility. Now, I want you to hear me out here, because I know some of you are going to see this and you are going to be like, well, how is she the queen of racism? Well, she's basically dubbed that onto herself. And she has called herself a racist in this particular book, which I've had the displeasure of reading too many sections of and too much of for the research for this video over the past few days. Dr. Robin DiAngelo truly is the queen of white supremacy, and I want you to understand that she actually enacts all of these items in this cycle, and she admits that she is a racist so many times. She even admits that she is a racist from the womb. And as I've said multiple times, not just in the first video on this, which was, not just on the first video on race and sex stereotyping, but on my video, Common Sense and the Government, I tell you this: the first time somebody tells you something, you believe them at face value. The second time they try to hide it. And if they keep doing it and they keep trying to hide it, they're trying to manipulate you, either to push their issues onto you or to make you complicit in what they are doing. And Robin DiAngelo is no exception to this. And we are going to go over some quotes from White Fragility that highlight this. I'm going to read them to you out loud, but they are on the screen. I know this looks like a wall of text, but just bear with me here. Quotes from the book. If I believe that the only bad people are racist, I will feel hurt, offended, and shamed when an unaware racist assumption of mine is pointed out. If I instead believe that having racist assumptions is inevitable, but possible to change, I will feel gratitude when an unaware racist assumption is pointed out. Now I am aware of and can change that assumption. End quote. What Robin DiAngelo is doing in this is very similar to what Kate Slater did in her UNH webinar series. Which is that she is normalizing racism. She is normalizing that people aren't bad inherently if they are racist, or if they commit acts of racism, which is categorically false. Racism is an act of evil. It is an evil act, and performing an act of racism not only hurts the person you are doing it towards, but it also hurts yourself internally. It is a very, very vicious and destructive cycle. Next quote. Many people have assured me that they will not give up on me despite my racist patterns. They expect that I will have racist behavior given the society that socialized me. What they are looking for is not perfection, but the ability to talk about what happened, the ability to repair. End quote. And I want to just remind everybody that when Robin DiAngelo writes in White Fragility, she is talking in a first-person perspective. Everything is her opinion. Everything. Everything is her idea. Everything is her, her stories, everything. It's all from a first-person perspective. So she implicates herself a lot in this book. She talks about a lot of acts of racism, a lot of racist thoughts that she has in this very, very horrific book. But in the second quote, she admits that she is a racist. And she again normalizes racism. And she begins normalizing and transitioning other people, into phase one of this cycle of modern racism. We're going to go into the third quote now. Quote, no cross-racial relationship is free from the dynamics of racism in this society, end quote. What DiAngelo is doing is that she's normalizing racism against people who are biracial or multiracial. And in the book, she talks about how you are either white or you are black. There is no in between. You have to identify. So effectively, in the book, she discriminates against multiracial people. At the same time, she normalizes this abuse within this quote. Next quote. Quote, I am not against Black History Month, but it should be celebrated in a way that doesn't reinforce whiteness. End quote. Again, she is inherently racist. Robin DiAngelo is a racist. We need to believe her when she tells us this. So when she's telling us this, we need to understand that she inherently does not like Black History Month, and she doesn't like black people. So of course we shouldn't be surprised when she goes after Black History Month and basically says that it is a form of quote-unquote whiteness in her opinion. So we need to understand that. The only true thing that she says, and she says a few true things in the book to manipulate you. She talks about how she's a racist, which we believe in, that's true. And she talks about how she believes that liberals cause the most damage to racial harm, and that is true because she is teaching those people. And those are her target audience. Her target audience is white liberals. She preys on them. She is a predator. That is what she is doing. So that is a true statement because she is doing it. And then there is this third quote, which is actually very true. Quote, I am often asked if I think the younger generation is less racist. No, I don't. In some ways, racism's adaptations over time are more sinister than concrete rules such as Jim Crow. End quote. Unfortunately, Robin DiAngelo is correct about this because she is perpetuating the cycle. She is prophesizing her cycle, and she is enacting it. She is truly the queen of racism. And again, I'm going to stop on this for a second, but this is the cycle of modern racism. You can tell that she's up here and she's an untouchable. She can say whatever she wants and manipulate it however she wants. But she wants this cycle to happen, and she is invested in it. In the book White Fragility, she focuses a lot on the foundation and on phase 1, as well as normalizing abuse in phase 2. She is currently writing another book right now, and I will talk about that in just a minute. But we're going to talk about how she was exposed recently for some of the things that she was doing. And she was exposed for her Be Less White training by organizational psychologist Dr. Karlyn Borysenko. There is a link to an article on this in the description, and there is a link to her Twitter handle in the description, where essentially Dr. Karlyn Borysenko on Twitter went on a 48-hour campaign to go after DiAngelo because on LinkedIn Learning, DiAngelo was selling, or in the voice of DiAngelo, was selling a anti-racism training that told people to be less white. But here's the problem, and I'm going to go to the next slide. In that anti-racism training, and you can't really see it too well on here, so I'm going to say it, being less white meant things such as being less certain. So you have to have more self-doubt. You have to have low self-esteem if you want to be less white. You have to be less ignorant. So being smarter now translates to being more black. And apparently other things such as believing people is a black concept, not a white concept. And a few other just ridiculous things. And the interesting thing is that the whistleblower that gave this to Dr. Borysenko was, 1, not a white person, and 2, the reason they were concerned about this is because, think about it, Robin DiAngelo says in this training to be less white, but she doesn't talk about the opposite of that, which is to be more black, but that's also what DiAngelo means. She also is telling, because remember, her concept is there's only black and there's only white. So if you are Indian, if you are Asian, or if you are Filipino, she's telling you have to identify as one or the other. You can't be Asian, you can't be Hispanic, you can't be. You have to identify as either being black or white. There's no in between. And so she's being very racist and inherently white supremacist against people who she is quote-unquote trying to protect and trying to educate white people on. And unfortunately, in her trainings, what she's doing, with this way that she's doing it, it is causing significant damage because white people don't understand anymore, at least in my generation, and it is becoming a very big problem in the educational sphere. Again, there is a neighboring school district that is doing stuff like this, that is starting to talk and do stuff like this, that they don't understand that what they're doing actually forces people from other ethnic categories or other racial categories that are not necessarily black and not necessarily white to choose, which is a very racist concept because there are more than just two races, and there's, being less certain is not a black or a white thing. Low self-esteem is not good. Why are we attributing that to blackness? That doesn't make any sense, and it's racist. And we need to take that at face value. And Dr. Borysenko, on this 48-hour Twitter roll that she went on, she not only got Coca-Cola to stop the training for their people, to stop making them do this Be Less White training, she got LinkedIn Learning to take it down. She went after LinkedIn Learning, which was hosting this. And then what ended up coming out after was that the group that did this training, that posted this on LinkedIn Learning, didn't get permission from DiAngelo. And so DiAngelo is, of course, now there's probably, legal action going against them. But what's even more interesting is that DiAngelo did admit that everything that's in that are full excerpts from trainings that she has done. She just didn't like the format that they were in. Probably because they showed her racism and showed her goals of perpetuating racism, of perpetuating systemic racism. And so that's really important. And so I just want to tip my hat off to Dr. Karlyn Borysenko for the work that she's done. Robin DiAngelo is also writing another book called Nice Racism. And I just want to point out that I believe that this book is going to perpetuate cycles, not cycle, but phase 2 and 3, where she's going to tell people to do more explicit acts of racism, and she's going to modify or normalize more abuse towards people. Because nice racism, how progressive white people perpetuate racial harm, sounds a lot like the concept at face value, like radical kindness, which is what we all know is normalizing abuse. Radical kindness is normalizing abuse. Nice racism is normalizing abuse, normalizing systems of abuse, and you need to understand that. There's another situation happening in the state of Massachusetts. So Robin DiAngelo used to work, when she was writing a lot of her original literature that eventually led up to white fragility, at Westfield State University, which is a Massachusetts state school, state college. Now, there is another issue at Smith College, where Smith has basically admitted that they are racially discriminating against different ethnic minority groups within the college. There is actually a lawsuit going on. Another brave woman, Jodi Shaw, is doing that, and I tip my hat off to her. If you want to learn more about her lawsuit, her Twitter handle is in the description. You can go and look that up. But she is suing them because the college was telling her to racially discriminate against people. The college is also having a major issue, Smith College is, and this is in Northampton, Massachusetts. This is another Massachusetts issue. And again, I want to point out, we have the Andover incident, we have the Andover experiment, we have Westfield State University, where Robin DiAngelo used to work, where she wrote a lot of her supporting literature for white fragility, and now we have Smith College, which is another place. This happened in Central Mass, this has been happening in Western Mass, this has been happening in Eastern Mass. This is a Massachusetts issue, and this is very much a problem here in the state. So Jodi is going after Smith College, she is suing them, but also because of the situation, and then also there are a lot of different professors, a lot of them are minorities that are standing up now because of another issue that has recently made the papers, and I don't understand the full nuances of it, which is why I'm just only grazing past it. On Jodi Shaw's Twitter, you will actually see it, described a lot more thoroughly, not just what she's going through, but also the new issues going on at Smith College where they are racially discriminating against people using this cycle of white supremacy. So you need to understand that they are doing the cycles. And then in a Nevada school district, and one of the only examples in this, video that is not going to be about an issue of in the state of Massachusetts, or that came from the state of Massachusetts, is that Gabrielle Clark is suing her Nevada school district, and Schoolhouse Rights is representing them. Their website is in the description. Her Twitter handle is in the description as well. I tip my hat off to her as well. She's doing great work with supporting her family on this, because her Nevada school system, because her children are multiracial, we're trying to force them to identify as either white or black, and they are also trying to force, she has 3 boys, and she won't admit which one it is, but one of them is gay, and she is upset because the school is also forcing students without their consent to come out publicly, and so they're put into these situations that may actually be extremely dangerous for members of the LGBTQ community. And so she's suing them on the grounds of that too, because that is full homophobia, transphobia, and it's also racial discrimination that's going on within that school district, because they want them to admit what race and what sex and what sexual orientation they are, so that they can also go through this cycle of white supremacy. The learning materials that have been revealed on that are very similar, if not exact, and follow the pattern of abuse, of normalizing abuse, of declaring your racism, of declaring your sexual orientation, of declaring whatever. And the reason I bring up this case is because this brings up that in the next video I'm going to talk about the sex stereotyping and scapegoating portion of this, because we've been talking a lot about racism and white supremacy, but there's a whole other field of this where they discriminate against people who are in the LGBTQ area, and it is a horrific situation. So I just want to tip my hat off to her. And are there any more slides? Nope. All right, we're going to transition back. I want to say thank you for sticking with me through this, and I hope this is very educational and informative. I hope you understand and go through and look at what you look up these different cases and understand what these different colleges and universities are doing, as well as avoiding anything that cites Robin DiAngelo, because she truly is a white supremacist, and we need to be aware of what she is doing, because she is part of this huge coalition of people, the White Power Caucus, that are creating new racism in the 2020s. And share this with people if you think it is informative. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking your time to listen to me. The next video will be again on the sex stereotyping issues. Thank you.